You are listening to Blood, Moon, Milk Astrology. I'm your host, Aurora, and we're here with Helene Childress, who is
Hello.
a palmistry extraordinaire. How are you doing today?
I am okay. I'm excited to be here. I feel like this is like a break. Like today is like a break in the Mercury retrograde, like BS that's been happening, and it feels good. Today feels good.
Yeah, actually, Mercury is doing some cool stuff today. Even though retrogrades are not always fun, just because the energy is a little bit more chaotic than normal, but he's making some fun aspects to both Venus and Mars. So it's a good day for us to have a conversation and to find some inspiration and get creative.
Awesome.
So you've been on the show before, and it's been a while. And you were one of my favorite guests from back in the day, from the before time.
During COVID or
It was before COVID.
okay, right before. I remember it was in your apartment and like I had to go under like a sheet.
The blanket fort. Yeah, the
It was
podcasting
I
blanket fort.
highly recommend a blanket fort podcast because like I think that's why it was so much fun. I felt like we were two kids like just playing podcast.
Yeah, I had many good days in the blanket fort with just me and the microphone and whatever tunes I was playing. And now it's, we're all kind of living in a slightly different world.
Yeah, like right now you're in a camper and I used to read poems out of a camper, but I don't have mine anymore. So I'm like, you came and had your hands read in my camper. I have beautiful pictures of it. But I don't know, this feels very like full circle, but also backwards.
Yeah, yeah. Also, it's not my camper that I'm in. I'm in a friend's camper, so it's their energy, it's their vibe.
Sure.
Um, your camper was so magical and beautiful and just lovely, like a little cottage core fairy tale, like had a camper child. Um,
Right. Yeah.
kind of the
I
vibe.
always felt like I was walking into like Hello Kitty's embrace when I went in there. It was again like such a childhood thing. But what's also funny, and I didn't even realize this till after I sold my camper because during COVID times got a little tough and I had to let her go. But I realized that I'm all Cancer Leo in my chart, right? So I'm all that homebody, but also that like, hey, look at me. So the fact that I was literally in a very like loud type of tiny home for my business like makes so much sense and it's hilarious.
I love how people's charts can kind of paint broad strokes of a picture, but that person's lived experience and their personal proclivities paint the details of it. And I
Right.
think that's one of the reasons I love astrology. And
Yeah.
I wanted to look at your chart with you today on the show to kind of show what I do for clients, but also because you had a session with me sort of before on our last episode that you were on the show. We kind of talked about your chart and how things happened for you during a very pivotal eclipse.
Mhm.
And just to catch up a little bit about like what's new in your life. I know the book has come out. Um, if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so the book feels, feels like an old baby now because it's been a couple years. Came out in 2019. So yeah, like 5 years, which is crazy.
Oh my.
But it is called The Handful of Stars, Palmistry Guidebook and Handprinting Kit. So it's actually a kit that you open up and it has ink, ink roller, and then a little booklet that guides you through reading your palm through your handprint. Because my biggest thing is when I first started reading palms, you just look at a hand and you're like, what the heck? Like, especially my hand is insane. I have like 500 lines, and it's like, what am I even looking at? How does somebody do that? Right. So I really wanted to break it down, not only for myself, but like so other people could do it too. And it's such a visual art that I felt like taking the print like off of your body really um, gave somebody they could hold on to when reading in like a more tangible way. So it's interesting now. I love that I'm not doing the print so much in terms of like pop-ups or events or anything like that, but I still do it at a Harry Potter camp for a little shop of stories in Decatur. And I do it for it's usually like 20 kids between the ages of like 5, 6, up to 10. And so I print their little hands, which is the sweetest thing. And then I walk them through it, and they are so brilliant. Like, I know if I can show a kid how to do it, that it's effective. But also their perspectives and everything is so funny. Like, I just have to say, there's this one line called a simian line, and it'll cut like straight across your hand. It's also called a transverse palmar crease. And it can be on people that have like intense energies. But I have found that it's on people that have something like, ADHD, or neuro, diversities. And the kids will be like, I'll explain kind of what it is in a way. And they'll be like, oh, yeah, I take medication for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Uh,
know that that line looks like, it kind of looks like the hand just folds in half.
yes,
Right?
exactly. Yeah. Apes have it. Gorillas have it. So, but that line actually is very scientifically studied because it does link to genetics. So it doesn't mean that you do have those things, but I know that my mom has one on one hand, and she has such an intense energy. Like, she always has to be doing something. I mean, it is pretty high anxiety, but her thing is she's a voracious reader. So, like, that's kind of how she gets her energy out in a healthy way for that. Um, so yeah.
That's awesome. I want to come back and have my palms reread by you, because you said that your hands change, like the lines change every few years, right? Like, what is it, 3 or 4
Yes.
or
Yeah.
something?
So it changes as your body changes because our skin does, regenerate.
Ugh,
And
sorry,
it
that was
has,
my moon in Libra, like being very upset about the
yeah,
passage of time.
like no. So since I've only been honestly reading like 7 years or something, and you had a reading for me pretty early on in the game, like I wouldn't be surprised if, I told you some, things I hadn't mentioned before. But our hands change as we change, and it's usually little things like, oh, there's a new little line there, or a new little something there. And I've seen it happen. One lady who came, and I don't know, some people get really into the palm reading and they're like, I'm going to do it 4 times. And I'm like, there's nothing new is going to show up, right? But she did it like 2 times with me. And then she went on the Appalachian Trail for like a year. And she sent me pictures, and she was like, I'll pay you, but I just want to see like if anything changed. And I was like, no, this is amazing. Let's look. And there was like this little line like on her lifeline, and your lifeline is like literally like your vitality and how good you feel. And I think she'd kind of been living in a way that wasn't like really authentic to her before. But there was like this little change. I was like, oh my gosh, you are like really feeling yourself now. And, it was a beautiful thing to see the before and after, but still just a little tiny line that showed it.
Hmm. So I wonder if it's like, for me, when I read somebody's astrology chart, like we have to wait on the planets to move to see
Right.
what is going to develop. But so that means like if you've got a really intense transit, like a Pluto transit, for example, moving over your sun, that can feel like an incredibly intense period of time. And
Mhm.
not everyone in our lifetimes will experience a Pluto transit over their sun.
Do I
So
have that going on right now?
no, because
Okay.
Pluto's in Capricorn and you're a
Good.
Cancer. You could be having stuff that's like opposing it. Like Pluto might be like on the cusp of opposition to your sun, but you're likely not going to live to see Pluto on your sun, because it takes him about 20 years to get through a sign. And
Okay.
you're, what, in your late 30s now, something like that?
Oh, you're so sweet.
But
Pretty
like,
far.
well, but like, so you would have to, and you're what, a Cancer or a Leo? Let me look at your chart
I'm a
actually.
Cancer sun, Leo rising, Cancer moon.
Okay, so you'd have to live for another 60 years
Yeah, no,
basically,
thank
at
you. Yeah.
least. Like just rough math, like to see when. Actually, I can look it up. Let's see
So
when.
Pluto is over Cancer sun, I mean Capricorn suns right now.
It's so Pluto is retrograde on the cusp between 1 degree or 0 degrees of Aquarius and 29 degrees of Capricorn. So
Okay.
it's going retrograde over those last degrees of Capricorn
Okay.
for the very last time in our lifetime. Um,
Interesting. Because
and
I'm like, my wife is a Capricorn, so that's why my ears came up.
and so let's see, you would have to uh you'd have to live until the year 2174 for you to have Pluto on your sun. So you'd have to live for quite a while.
Yeah, that's okay. And I don't really want to live for that either.
No,
I
you probably
really
you'd live
want to
for
go
it
through this Pluto transit.
and then you would die probably.
Right.
Like, because like Pluto transiting a sun is
Right.
typically very dramatic. It can actually signify a time when your life is in some sort of peril, or you live through some sort of physical disaster or trauma that
Hmm.
then transforms you. It tears everything away and then rebuilds you. It's kind of like this death, rebirth, phoenix kind of transit.
Right. Which I feel like I've done. I feel like probably all feel like we've done that, especially through COVID, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there's
Um,
definitely there are things that are similarly transformative, but I think Pluto transiting the sun is gotta be the most traumatic uh,
okay.
of the transits I can think of.
Okay.
And I know that because I lived through it.
Yeah.
And so when I see other people going through it, um, I my hearts just go out to them. Like it's everybody like who were people who were like going through cancer treatments or
Yeah.
like, and not
Okay.
everybody who has cancer has that going
Sure.
on, but
Right.
it's indicative of something foundationally transformative and like their perspectives change, their
Mhm.
priorities change. um
Right.
it's like
Life completely life changing. Yeah.
yeah,
Sure.
but then we see the transits and the planets move on and they're if they're still with us, which they usually are, like it's not a death sentence, but
Right.
like people look back and they're like, oh my god, yeah, it's like night and day. It's
Right.
in the aftermath.
That's so interesting because when I think about astrology, sometimes I think about like what I do and I see things on people's hands where it's like, it can be a little hard to talk about it because it's like it looks like you're going to go through something. It's going to change your life. It might be a surprise, and honestly I can't tell if it's good or if it's bad. But it would be interesting for me to know their chart, to see if something like that was involved because
Mhm.
then it's like okay, it might be this, but not. But again, I feel like that's on a slippery slope of like, do you need to know everything that's coming, or you
Yeah.
just
And
know what I'm saying?
there's certainly things that are and I've seen clients come through and they'll have a Uranus aspect, and Uranus is famously unpredictable, so he's predictably unpredictable. So you can
Mhm.
kind of say like, well, I don't know what it's going to be.
Right.
It has these three key characteristics depending on the house and what he's touching, and so keep all
Right.
these things in mind and be aware, like, and be like, don't be too surprised when you're surprised.
Right. Oh, so didn't we just have an Uranus transit? Like it was Monday because I knew to be aware that something was going to happen out of the blue. And I was like, it's going to be work. It's going to be this. I always try to guess, right? But the thing is, you're not going to know, right? And then I got a call from my daughter's school that she had hit somebody. And I was like, there it is. That's it. I didn't expect that. And
Yeah.
it's fine. She's 8, but like it completely unexpected.
Yeah. I mean, like, this one woman, I should say, she wasn't a girl, woman, came to me and I think she had, it was a Uranus, I want to say on her moon, like, and her moon was in Taurus, I think. And so remember looking at it, and it was near the north node, her north node or something like that, and was like, this is destiny and it's unpredictable and it has to do with your femininity. Also, I think, I forget which house it was in. It might have been her 8th house or something. So it had to do with sex and reproduction.
Hmm.
And she was like, oh, we're trying to have another baby. And she ended up having to go, like, within 2 days of the date I told her, I was like, don't make any plans for this weekend because they're going out the window somehow.
Right.
They will. And so don't go traveling, like, don't buy expensive tickets to an event or anything like that. Maybe just plan on having a quiet weekend at home.
Yeah.
And she had to go into the ER. She had a cyst on her ovary.
Oh, yeah.
And she's okay. She's
Yeah.
fine. But
Yeah.
like it did technically tick all those boxes.
Right.
We
Yeah.
couldn't have predicted what that would be though.
Right. Yeah. And that's how kind of I do astrology is I listen to it and then I look for it. And then when it happens, I'm like, that was it. And everyone around me is like, you're such a nerd.
Oh, I
Well, I mean, except when it's not, but
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be illuminating, and it's a tool. I think it's one of the best tools for personal self-reflection, mindfulness, and growth. That's what the show really is all about.
right.
Um, as I try to prompt and cue people to check in with themselves, check in with their bodies and their goals and what they're really working towards, and just be mindful of where you're putting that energy.
Right. And I think the mindful aspect is so important because I almost look at astrology or like um yeah, as it's kind of my church. Like I don't go to church, but when you go to church and there's usually like something that's highlighted and you talk about it, and it's very usually like brings you insight or perspective or peace. And I kind of look at astrology like that because something is usually very highlighted. And then you can like look at it in all angles. How does it make you feel? Blah, blah, blah. And so it gives me something to work on, to work on myself. Um, yeah, every day.
Yeah, and so like I feel like there's a lot of benefits to astrology, but it can also be a rabbit hole that
Oh, God, yes.
sucks you in, and then you're overanalyzing
Yeah.
every situation you're going through.
Yeah. Every week I listen to my horoscope. I ask my wife if she's gonna leave me. And she's like, I please don't listen to it anymore. And I'm like, I'm kidding. It's with a grain of salt, but like, it can do that to you, like
Yeah.
looking, expecting the worst out of life. Yeah.
Well, I mean, in partnerships, it's two astrology charts at play. It's not just yours. Um, I will say in my most recent long-term relationship that ended, um, his chart, well, not that he was even interested in astrology, like we were different in a lot of ways, but there was a nasty eclipse. He had a lot of placements in Libra in the 12th house, and there was an eclipse that happened. And eclipses bring sudden departures and endings to things. And that eclipse like hit a bunch of those 12th house placements, so his subconscious, and it was not a good eclipse that happened last fall. And so it was kind of couldn't really talk to him about it because he wasn't interested. But it
Mhm.
was interesting to see the behaviors and the actions show up that were sort of reflected in the chart. you know didn't help, didn't change anything,
Right.
you know
Right.
um but like the 12th house is a very secretive subconscious house that where like the person who has planets there a lot of times don't even understand like what's going on subconsciously beneath the surface, and there can be an unwillingness to even look there, to
Right.
really look under the hood, if you will, of their psyche and their subconscious because they're afraid.
Yeah.
And it's like it can be kind of sad, like to see that and just to, like try to coach somebody into relaxing and talking about those feelings and those thoughts
Mhm.
in a safe place that's supportive. But if they're just not open and amenable to it, like you can't fight those demons for somebody, not we have
Yeah.
demons necessarily, like that's not what I mean.
Yeah.
It's just like, well, this was probably always going to happen,
Right.
but we couldn't. It was sad to me that like we couldn't talk about it. um like, not that I didn't try, but um
Yeah. People have to go through their own stuff, like if
absolutely.
that's like the biggest lesson I think I've learned in the past 5, 10 years is like you can't heal somebody for them.
No.
I think I've played the part of the empath in the relationship with the narcissist, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of us have, and I really feel like that was a big theme during the big lockdown. So all these people were stuck with their others, and there was a lot of domestic violence and things. But yeah, I don't know if I got off topic there, but
No, it's okay. I love you that you're sitting and petting your cat now.
wow. So this is Puffy. He's my little demon, but he just got diagnosed with heart disease. So I'm like, you know, he's speaking of empath, this guy is like, I don't know if you believe in star seeds and all that, but he's so sensitive. He has to have his own room. Like my library is like his bedroom. He
Aw.
can't really handle real life. So he kind of hides up here and yeah, I'm just worried about him. Let's look at
Aw.
your chart, Puffy, see what you're doing.
Well,
Uh,
if you hear a kitty purring on the
yeah,
audio version of the podcast, that's what that noise is, and he's very handsome.
thank
Um,
you.
looks like part
He wanted
Siamese, maybe.
he, he wanted to be seen. All right. So when you do a chart reading, what do you do? Do you look at it and like break it down, or do you look at it as like one big picture and
Well,
like
let's do it, and I'll show you. This is what an astrology reading is
I
like.
only really piecemeal things, I'm not an astrologer. I'm like, oh, my, Venus is in Gemini, my Mercury is in Cancer, but like putting it together, I feel like can get a little
Yeah,
more.
so
Okay.
my astrology sessions are all Zoom these days, because my life is so here, there, and everywhere. The best way for me to do a session is via Zoom, put a time on the calendar, and then I'll book that time off away from, the chaos of my life or that client.
Mhm.
And then I'll share my screen. I'll share the screen with you, what we're looking at.
You're
Um,
gonna show me that big circle with all the lines that I don't
yep,
understand.
you see it? um, so what we're looking at here, this is your birth chart. And for people who are listening and maybe want to follow along, her birthday is July 11th, 1980, 11:25 a.m. in Kennesaw, Georgia, when you were borked or born. Uh,
Yes.
sorry, that's a little inside joke there. But
Yeah.
when you came into this life, and so um, she has a stellium in Cancer, and her North Node is in the first house in Leo, which is fame and creativity.
Really?
Um,
That's not happening.
I mean, but like, okay, so we'll talk about transits in a second. The natal chart is just sort of the thumbprint, if you will, the blueprint um, of the personality. And so it's sort of like the baseline operating system. You have free will, and you're also subject to the weather and the energies in which we're collectively swimming in. So just because it hasn't happened or it isn't happening, doesn't feel like it's happening, doesn't mean it's happened yet. Um,
Also, I feel like these words can be a little like open-ended, right? So it's like
yeah.
fame, but it could also just be like a little notoriety, right? Like it doesn't have to be
I mean, like it's certainly
like
um
a light is on you. Leo is a light, right? Or the
well,
sun.
Leo is creativity, but it likes to be recognized for like its unique gifts and what it has to offer. And it is like, look at me, I am creative, I have this talent, recognize it or peace out. I will go somewhere where people will recognize it.
My daughter is a Leo rising too, and that can be, I mean, her whole situation. She's Scorpio, Sun, Leo rising, Aries moon.
A
It's
lot of
very,
mixed energy there. Well, the Aries
very
is
hard.
But
But our Leo rising, I feel like my poor wife will be singing like Disney songs, and like telling each other to shut up.
uh,
Anyways, go ahead.
so just to set the chart up, her rising is at 11 degrees Leo. The North Node's at 20 degrees Leo in the first house. And then you have Jupiter in the second house with Virgo. So that's money. That's like big income. Um, might not be there yet, but Virgo is all about the details and having a plan and being practical. So it might not be like gushing towards you like that money, but Jupiter in the second house definitely has the ability to create large amounts of income. But you also have Saturn in your second house. So that means like there's got to be structure and responsibility and
That's
discipline.
like my lesson. It's
Yeah.
like the challenge, right?
It's like you might be able to make it, but as soon as you make it, you really need to think about what you're going to do with it in a strategic way. And Mars is loosely conjunct Saturn there. He's at 0 degrees, 25 minutes of Libra. So they're not exactly conjunct, but they're close enough to be having a conversation where, and Saturn conjunct Mars also suggests like, um, themes and issues around authority figures, masculinity, or men influencing your income to some degree or squashing it,
Mm.
people cock blocking your ability to make money there.
Hmm.
Um, and then in the third house, we have Pluto at 19 degrees Libra. So that suggests a real gift and magnetism for communication, and being fair and balanced and doing it in a beautiful way. And then in the fourth house, we have Uranus in Scorpio at 21 degrees. So that could have been getting activated with Uranus transiting through Taurus, definitely moving unexpectedly, changing housing situations erratically over the last few years. It's probably winding down now, but when that was exact, probably about 2.5, 3 years ago, mid COVID probably, uh,
Hmm.
was feeling that a lot.
Mm.
In the fifth house, we have Sagittarius at 8 degrees on the cusp, with Neptune at 20 degrees in the fifth house. So Sagittarius and Neptune is like kind of romanticizing adventure and travel and philosophy. Also, the esoteric studies, the occult to some degree, and having a talent for that as well, which you definitely do with being a chirologist or a hand reader. In the sixth house, we have Capricorn on the cusp at 11 degrees, but there's nothing in that house. It's a void house, which means that work really should be like you. Capricorn on the cusp of the sixth house says you have a great work ethic. You see the big picture, you know how to put the pieces together, you know how to be a boss lady, and there shouldn't be any real issues from a karmic perspective, the way this chart's set up. Um, but it still is affected by transits. So we can talk about that in a little bit. And then in the seventh house, we have the South Node in Libra. And, oh no, sorry, South Node in Aquarius in the seventh house. So South Node in Aquarius, the comfort zone for you is doing the sort of more avant-garde, road less traveled kinds of things. It's harder and more difficult for you to find that leadership, that like position of authority, but you're destined to find it because that North Node in Leo demands it. And as you mature and as transits go over that sensitive point, you'll be pushed towards it more and more and more.
Okay.
And then in the eighth house, another void house, it has Pisces on the cusp there at 3 degrees. At on the ninth house, it's another void house. And void houses, for our listeners, just means there's no planets in that house. It's a slice of the astrological pie where there's just nobody hanging out the day that she was born. But it doesn't mean that she has weaknesses or any issues with those areas. Generally, it's just sort of like business as usual. No real complexities we have to concern ourselves with too much. You have Taurus at 3 degrees on your midheaven. So that's communication and beauty and doing things in a methodical kind of way. Um, and like in a way that's sort of comforting and comfortable, not necessarily speedy, but thoughtful and beauty and well planned. Um, and then in the 10th house, we have Chiron. So there could be some wounds around professional achievement,
Mm.
because, or not feeling like you've been recognized professionally for your contributions, or maybe you haven't been feeling like you have been rewarded fairly for what you bring to the table in the
Is
past.
10th house like career or work or
Yeah, it's career and professional standing in the world. And then in your 11th house, you have Gemini on the cusp, and you have quite a few planets in the 11th house. So you have Venus in Gemini, you have the moon in Cancer, and also Vesta's in Cancer in the 11th house. So
what's Vesta?
Vesta's interesting. So Vesta is an asteroid related to devotion and the inner flame, the inner knowledge. And for you, your Vesta placement and your moon placement are right on top of each other. And the Vestal Virgins, back in ancient Rome, were tasked with keeping the flame of Rome alive. And they had a lot of privileges back then. They could vote, they could own property, but they weren't allowed to get married. They weren't allowed, they were virgins until they retired from tending the flame, and then they were allowed to marry. Um, but it's like feminine company is indicated.
Feminine company.
Yeah, feminine company. Um, Also, Venus in Gemini also suggests a sexual duality, or at least an interest in
We
more.
get a bad rap. We get a bad rap.
I don't know. I would say maybe easily influenced,
Sure,
or open to suggestions.
sure.
Could be one way of looking at Venus and Gemini energy. And then you have a bunch of stuff in your 12th house too. You have your sun is in the 12th house, conjunct your Mercury, by the way. And Mercury is retrograde for you natally. I don't know if you were aware of that.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? I
It
mean,
means
it means that it was retrograde when I was born, but how does that affect like the rest of my life?
I
Or does it not?
I think it, well, I haven't experienced it because my Mercury is direct in my chart, but I have a sense that it makes you more comfortable with being intuitive and receiving information from non-traditional channels, like just sensing it, and
Okay.
having a hunch that you follow versus like needing external validation of information and instructions. So when Mercury is retrograde, instead of energy coming to us from the exterior sources. So what happens is the energy, it's like polarities are reversed. And so
Okay.
it shows up in physical objects breaking and things that are needing to be replaced, kind of falling apart because the stress and the energy has collected in those objects. Like that's one
Oh,
esoteric way of kind of trying
that's
to
interesting.
communicate like what is happening.
So when
Um,
I break something, I can just be like, this is a sign and it's okay.
yeah, well, a lot of times when stuff breaks during a retrograde phase, it means it's time for an upgrade. It
Huh. Oh
and
man, my car is currently breaking.
that's
I know it's time for an upgrade, but it's also time for some of that fame and money to get the car.
well, so let's look at your transits now. And I just kind of breezed through a lot of these placements for a couple reasons, because people listening to somebody else's chart might not be that interested, but also I wanted to like move things along a little bit. When I sit with a client, I'll typically tell them exactly like what each thing is, and I'll also give them a lot of reading material after our sessions too.
Okay. So
I
this
think
is today.
this is
Yes.
today that, yeah, we're looking at right now.
I feel like there's so much going on. There's changes, there's things up in the air.
Oh yeah, yeah.
There's stress. Yeah.
So Mercury's in your first house. He just hit over your North Node in Leo, and well, he's going to actually. He's retrograde. So he's getting really close to it. There might be some messages coming through that kind of feel like destiny that really affect that personality of the first house, which is your body. You might even start or revisit like a exercise routines, like fitness, could be something that's coming up now, because the sun just moved into Virgo. He's at 1 degree Virgo now, which is all about health. And with you have Leo in the first house, but you also have a little bit of Virgo in the first house too, which could make you very particular about your appearance, to some degree, like fastidious in some ways, which I think Virgo is really beneficial energy to Leo energy. Leo by itself, left unchecked, is just an explosion of creative ideas. With Virgo's help, those ideas get channeled into actionable, realistic, practical avenues that are applicable and enjoyable.
I am a graphic designer, so on the daily.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have Venus in the second house. So, and it's conjunct your Saturn. So you're probably not feeling the money flowing right now.
Mm-mm.
Like you're kind of like, where'd it go? It was,
Agreed.
you might have felt it a little like a few weeks ago when about 3 weeks ago, I would guess, when he was, or she would have been conjunct your Jupiter. There might have been somebody inviting you to an event where you could work or make some extra income.
Mhm.
Did anything like that actually happen that
Yeah,
you? Yeah,
yeah. I scheduled. I don't do many events like palm reading events, but I did just schedule a Christmas party, which
there you go.
pretty penny. So
Yeah, that would have
yeah.
probably, I'd be willing to guess that Venus would have been near to conjunct your Jupiter
Right.
and your.
But my actual like day job is very uncertain. Like there's big changes being made, so I'm
Yeah,
not sure if the actual company is going to be around much longer. So that's, the money stuff, just the unknowing and the stress around it,
yeah. Well, I think so the North Node is in your third house right now, which
which
is
is,
communication. It also rules publishing.
oh,
And
I work in publishing.
yeah, well, it's transiting. So this is the transiting North Node, or no, South Node. I'm sorry, South Node's in Libra. So he's gonna move from your when. So we've been in a Libra South Node Aries North Node period of time, for about not quite 18 months. I would say just around a year or so. And so he's at 7 degrees of Aries and Libra on that axis. The North Node, South Node is an axis, so they're always directly opposite from each other. Um, and when he goes backwards, that South Node goes backwards, the Node also goes backwards. It'll go from Aries into Pisces, and the South Node will go from Libra into Virgo. When he gets to 0 degrees Libra, he'll be conjuncting your Mars in that second house. So there could be some old contact, some friend you knew that offers you an opportunity of some sort to change the way you make money and at some point. But then there could be a period of reality setting in where, like, okay, maybe you get the role, but then there's more responsibility.
Mhm.
And so it can feel like, well, I leveled up, but man, I'm a lot busier.
Right. Yep. I know that's what it might be.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I've reached out to people, so that makes sense.
Yeah, so I think that's all a definite possibility for you based on just those couple of planets at a glance. But that
So
would,
when you're kind of saying like this is what's happening now, but then you see these like the inner ring, I feel like you're talking about more detail stuff. So how,
so the
I
inner
guess
ring
it
is
all of it, yeah, go ahead.
the inner ring is your natal chart. And I'm
Oh,
looking at how the outer ring, which is the transiting planets, are interacting with
okay.
uh, your natal chart. And that gives me timing information. Uh,
Okay.
and so I could say, when the south node is conjunct your Mars, it'll be, let's see, I have to do it now. Hold on. Sorry. I have this little handy search thing, but it's being covered up by my Zoom window. So let's see. It'll be in January is when Mars will be conjunct the South Node. Um, your natal Mars will be conjunct the South Node. So that's months away, but I think that's when you'll see action that'll feel like things falling into place. And then, give it some more time, probably about 6 months ish, 6 to 8 months for that South Node to then hit Saturn. And then it'll feel like, oh, wow, this responsibility, it'll be rewarding.
Mhm.
But that's kind of what I see happening in the
That is
next.
such beautiful information. Like just to know that, I feel like I can breathe for a minute.
Yeah,
Even though that's like a full,
that's
five
6 months
five
away.
months. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's just
Oh,
one planetary placement. But we can look at the houses in astrology and get ideas about what's going on there, some themes and insights to answer questions, just like the one you had. Like, well, my job's kind of, but how will things be?
yeah.
Um, but I mean, I know 6 months can feel like a long time to wait to see developments happening.
Mhm.
Um, but in a way, it kind of frees you up to
Right.
some mental, in a mental energy kind of way. You're not
Right.
anguishing about like when things will change.
Takes away a little bit of that unknown, and I think that is very relieving because the unknown is such a scary place.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's in the unknown and in the void that everything and anything is possible, though.
Yes, you're true. That's right.
So, I mean, that's where mindfulness and manifestation like come into
Hmm.
play because you're like, okay, I've got 6 months for something to manifest.
Right. Yeah, I still have no idea what we're talking about, but
Yeah.
there's something.
Yeah.
I could like own an ice cream shop. Who knows?
I mean, wouldn't that be fun?
It would. I'd be so fat, but yes, it'd be fun.
Yeah. Yeah. It's also a lot of work. I knew somebody who had an ice cream shop and it was like if you want to do it right and you're making everything from scratch, it's really,
Oh
really
yeah.
challenging.
It was really funny that I said that is first of all, why did I say it? But um before I found palm reading and I got the camper, I like knew I had to have a business in the camper. Like I had to do something with it. And I started looking into doing nails, which is so funny because I didn't end up doing nails, but it was the
Hand
hand,
related.
right? So it's, I don't know, the little breadcrumbs of that get you to where you're going are so interesting to take note of.
Oh yeah. Um, I it is. I mean, similarly for me, I talk about a mythology a lot on the show, and like when I was talking about Vesta in your chart, um, mythology and the stars were always something as a kid that I just was totally in love with and enamored with. Like these stories that
Mhm.
people telling each other, as long as, history is has been history has been
Right.
happening, since the ancient Greek times and the Hellenistic period. We've had these Greek heroes and these explanations for like why things are the way they are. Um, and I look at it and it's sort of comforting because these stories and these explanations have been around far longer than almost any other
Right.
science, country, government. Like it's literally as old as time and history
Right.
itself.
With all this communication, anyways, and myths in these same planetary terms are in the hands too. So they're like these timeless ancient archetypes that we all still, we're just humans. We all still relate to.
Yeah. So I know we're getting a little close to our time today,
You
but with
see
any
any other like blaring messages or
let me look at your chart real quick. So Saturn's in the eighth house right now, and at 17 degrees. And you've also got Neptune. Okay, so Neptune is going to change signs next year.
Mhm.
He'll be moving out of Pisces into Aries. And when he does that, I think that's going to be a seismic shift that we feel collectively.
Mm.
It's going to take us out of this sort of like watery spiritual energy into a certain kind of philosophical and spiritual righteousness. Like, and I feel like people are going to get a little bit more aggro and aggressive
Mm.
and willing to fight for their beliefs. And I think we're going to see now, you don't have anything in your ninth house where Aries is. But I'm saying this to our collective, the audience that's listening, because this is something that we're all going to experience and see and feel and show up in the news and in world events and social political waves that kind of emanate outwardly. And so when that happens, we'll also be seeing the North Node axis going into Pisces. So it's like Neptune and the North Node will be conjuncting themselves at some point. I haven't looked at where that's happening yet. I haven't looked ahead for that. But I suspect that'll be a trigger point, kind of like how and I don't know, I hope it's not a bad one, but like the most obvious thing that happened the last time that Neptune was in Aries was the Civil War. And
Mm.
so it's like this ideological, self-righteous, I'm right, my beliefs are right, pitted against, no, my beliefs are right,
Right.
all out battle for
Sounds
justice.
political.
Yes. Yes. So I think that's going to be coloring astrological events next year. And that's going to be a big one for everybody. And especially when we see that North Node Neptune conjunction. Whenever I see sensitive points coming together that are slow moving like that, I mean, it takes 18 years for the North Node to make its way all the way around the zodiac, and even longer for Neptune. So when they conjunct, that's a signal to me that something is afoot. And back in December of 2019, we had I think it was a triple conjunction. I think it was Jupiter and Saturn and Pluto were all conjunct in Capricorn, which is, well, Jupiter expands things, Saturn is restrictions, and Pluto is death. So that was the symbolism that happened. And it was after that conjunction happened that we see the fallout, right? Um,
Mm.
and so I'm curious about what this North Node Neptune conjunction will look like collectively for people. Um, and I guess I could see when it happens. Let's see, when does that happen? North Node conjunct transiting Neptune will be February 2025, February
Mm.
7th. So just a month after, by the way, your Mars will be conjunct that South Node. And let me just look at the chart. So 28 degrees of Pisces. So that's very much, and Saturn will be 10 degrees away. So that's technically conjunct. And Venus is in an out of sign conjunction to Neptune. So there's money to be made here. There's definitely spiritual and religious beliefs of some sort, and destiny all playing a hand, and Saturn coming in with a sense of authority and structure and discipline, coming in for us collectively. And so
Ooh.
I think February 7th of next year is definitely like a red letter day astrologically. It'll be interesting to see what happens then. I, since I'm just kind of am discovering this as I'm talking about your chart, like I
Uh-huh.
haven't done the analysis of it.
Yeah.
But I also the Sun and Mercury conjunct, that's going to be an interesting day. Also, that'll be really conjunct your, like close to conjunct your South Node in the 7th house. So partnership uh, themes could come up for you around that time personally.
Okay.
That could
Sounds
be business partnerships if you're not, your partner's not leaving you, but
She's leaving me. Just kidding, just kidding. I don't.
No, it could be good news for you. But
Well, yeah, we got some stuff going on, so it's very interesting to see. Okay, so now February 7th, everyone, we're gonna
yeah, we're gonna probably
prepare.
prepare for Civil War. Hopefully not.
Right? Well, I think when you say things like that, it's important to make sure we're also taking care of ourselves so that we can, emotionally and mentally handle the things that are going on around us, you know? So
Yes.
really
Yeah.
good foresight.
Well, I think it's I don't say these things to scare people. If anything, I try to give people a heads up to give them time to mentally prepare and to also like in that preparation work on their meditation skills, work on their empathy skills, work on their skills of seeing the bigger picture outside of how their actions and
Mhm.
like implement and affect their own lives, but also their communities, and like
Absolutely.
literally just fostering kindness in the world. Because if there is that sense of kindness and community, then that sense of aggression kind of like naturally diminishes. And so like the rising tide of kindness and empathy and self-acceptance and understanding like really raises the emotional intelligence and fortitude of the community.
Yeah. It's so beautiful. You're so talented at what you do. Really, this whole reading and everything has been amazing.
Well, you're very gifted at what you do, and you're one of my favorite people to have back on the show. I hope you'll come back for an episode in the future.
I
And
would love to.
great. All right. Well, we're going to wrap up the show there. Where can people find you if they want to check out everything you do?
Instagram, which is handful of stars underscore readings. That's mainly where I am. I don't do the TikTok. Because it's hard to see, things moving when you're talking about palmistry and all that. But yeah, just Instagram for now.
Great. Well, I will link to your stuff on the website, and thank you for joining us. Helene, it's always a pleasure.
Thank you.